Welcome back to another episode of the podcast of Basketball Love. I'm your host, Josh Verlin, along with my partner in crime, CoBL assistant editor, Owen McCue. It's Friday, November 18th, 2022. We are less than 2 weeks into the Division I basketball season, but we have already learned plenty about the area's programs, from the Villanova women's strong start to Temple men's up and down opening stretch, and so much more. Thrilled to be joined today by Mike Jensen of the Philadelphia Inquirer. Mike's been covering Philly college hoops probably for longer than he'd like me to admit, seeing everything from the Fran Dunphy years at Penn and covering John Chaney at Temple, all the way through the entire Jay Wright run at Villanova, and so much more over the last few decades. Mike, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, great to be on with you guys.
Before we get into things, got to pay those podcast bills. Today's podcast is brought to you by Competitive Edge Sports, conveniently located in King of Prussia, just minutes from 76 in the King of Prussia Mall. Competitive Edge's 5-court state-of-the-art facility. It's great for basketball, volleyball, futsal, and sports performance. Learn more at cesports.net. So, guys, let's get into it. Lots to cover today. Obviously, 12 teams in the city, 6 between the men's and the women's. Lots of different storylines going on, but I think we can all agree the number one sort of up and down storyline in the city right now is Temple men's basketball. Start the season off with a surprising loss to Wagner, come back, beat a ranked Villanova, and then lose to Vanderbilt the other night, and sort of things just fell apart afterwards. Mike, you were there at the Liacouras Center for that game. Caleb Battle only plays 19 minutes. Aaron McCue calls him out in the press conference afterwards. What is going on with Temple basketball right now?
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, they took a 22-11 lead without Caleb Battle in the game. They put him in the game, lost the lead. So clearly Aaron didn't see something at one end or the other that he liked. Plus Vanderbilt, you know, they play in the SEC. They have a taller lineup. So I'm slowing down in the sense that, okay, the coach decided to play the players who got the lead, who had the plus minus for that particular game. Zach Hicks came out hot. He's taller, so he can defend taller, and that mattered. So that, in fact, was the best lineup that they put out there against Vandy. But after the game, Javon Edwards, to his credit, first question, what was going on with Caleb Battle? And Aaron McCue, he's blunt. He said, I put the guys out there who, you know, what was the quote?
Who want to be out there.
Who wanted to be out there. And then, you know, Caleb first put a laughing emoji in a response to that on social media, then took it down. So, you know, that part of it's really the interesting part of it is, you know, this going to be an ongoing saga? Is Caleb Battle going to buy into what Aaron's now telling him this week? You know, these next games ahead are going to tell that story.
I mean, how pivotal of a point is this for Temple? We're in McKee's fourth year. This is supposed to be his best team, the one that maybe starts to get back Temple a little bit to the glory days. And now here they are, 1-2. And yeah, they have one great win, but all these question marks. Well, what's the current state of where Temple basketball needs to be?
Yeah, I mean, those are the relevant questions. Fourth year, huge year. Haven't been to the NCAA tournament. Temple is a program where success is going to be, you know, the bar starts at getting to the NCAA tournament. So this is big. You know, like you said, the Wagner overtime loss is like, whoa, this was supposed to be, you know, a team picked fifth in the AAC, which to me puts you on the bubble and maybe the wrong side of the bubble. So you better get to maybe top 4 in a very tough basketball league. But these non-conference games count just as much. So there's the loss. Villanova, there's the win that you needed. So that let's say that offsets that. Well, a Villanova win, even we'll talk about, you know, where Villanova is right now, but a Villanova win does not offset a Wagner overtime loss, a Vandy overtime loss, both all at home. So right now, you know, more questions than answers suddenly for Temple.
Yeah, I didn't get over there the other night, Mike, but obviously kind of the other stuff overshadowed Damian Dunn, and he's been good all season, but that was kind of one of those all-time kind of performances. How good was he, and what does he do?
Well, let's put it this way. This was like a Big Five player of the year kind of performance. It was that good, 38 points, and hit big, tough shots. And really, in the end, could have gotten a foul call. It wasn't as much of a 100% foul call as when they called it on Brendan Slater at the end of the Villanova game. But there was contact. There was no call. Well, that's part of big boy basketball too. You're not always going to get that call. But Damian Dunn is really playing. I mean, one of the big questions for Temple going in, right, was, there's one basketball, Damian Dunn, Khalif Battle. And I'm not going to say they're not the same player at all, but both, are used to having the ball in their hands to score. So the Villanova game was a very positive development that one got 22, the other got 21. They get the W. That's the best case scenario. Here was the other side of the coin.
Mike, Temple's upcoming schedule, they got Rutgers today, this afternoon at Mohegan Sun. They got St. John's at the Barclays Center. Then they'll play either Richmond or Syracuse after that next week. Drexel and LaSalle before the end of the month. Is it pretty safe to say that going into December, we'll have a much clearer picture of where this season's at for Temple?
Yeah, those are all games that you need to get some of those games. You need to win some of those games, obviously, if tournament teams win some of those games.
Yeah,
we
Temple,
mentioned sorry.
Sorry, yeah, the Temple men, obviously the win over Villanova was one of the biggest of the areas, but on the other side, on the women's side, the Villanova women beat a really good ranked Princeton team last week and then kind of rolled that into this week. They're now 3-0. Josh, you got to see them last night. Kind of what are your initial impressions? I got to see them against Jefferson, and obviously they looked really good, but we weren't kind of sure how good they would be coming off the tournament season last year, and it seems like they're pretty darn good again.
Yeah, I mean, look, it starts when you have Maddie Siegrist, when you have an All-American candidate. It seems like everything's going to go well from there, right? But certainly Lucy Olson's taken a big step forward. Christina Dalsey, another sophomore, taking a big step forward. Maddie Burke, the Penn State transfer from CB West. I mean, they brought her in for her shooting ability. When she goes 4 for 5 from 3, that's going to look pretty good. They beat Penn very easily last night. So yeah, they're 3-0. They're ranked nationally. Mike, I don't know how much of the Harry Peretta era you got to cover. I'm assuming you got to cover a decent amount of it during your time with the Inquirer. Are you surprised that Denise Dillon has been able to just keep things rolling the way that she has over there at Villanova?
Well, if I was surprised, I wouldn't have written a column saying hire Denise Dillon. Don't even talk to anybody else. That was the no-brainer. She had done such things at Drexel. They were going to transfer over to Villanova. So no, nothing surprising about that. And when she inherited, a player like Maddie Siegrist, you can keep the transition rolling, which is obviously, was Harry's goal in life. I did cover Harry quite a bit. But I'll say this, just to, not to throw water on the Villanova start. It's a great start, but they're going to miss Herlihy, as the games go on. And this team is going to have to prove that it's a good defensive team. Like you said, Lucy Olson stepping up is huge. Maddie Burke she is a shooter. She'll have to prove that she can play defense. The games that Villanova needs to show itself are still ahead, because Maddie's not just an All-American candidate. She's an All-American. She's going to play in the WNBA. But everybody else knows that. So good defensive teams. She's not easy to guard. I wrote a column on her at Big East Media Day saying, talking to Doug Bruno, who's, as knowledgeable a coach as there is out there, that a Paul coach. And he said there's no one way to cover her. She's going to counter what you're going to do. So if you throw an extra body at that to change the equation, it's going to be up to Villanova teammates to decide, how good an offensive team this could be. But again, Mike, defense, huge.
This might be an unfair question to sort of just throw at you here, but considering my knowledge of Philadelphia area women's basketball goes back about 18 months, when you look at Maddie Siegrist's career, over the women that you've covered over the last couple of decades, is she top 5? Is she in there? Could she be the best Philadelphia college basketball player of the modern era? I mean, who when you think of the best women's college players that you've seen in your time, who comes to mind?
Yeah, I mean, let's assume you're going to say Elena Deladon doesn't count at Delaware. If you're talking,
let's get City 6. Yeah.
Yeah. No, she's right up there. Laura Kurz was a great player at Villanova. I mean, Shelley Pennefather, was a player of the year nationally kind of player, but that was back before my time, early 80s for Harry Peretta. So in my time, I mean, there have been some great players, and Davis at Temple was just terrific. Penn and St. Joseph had some players, but yeah, absolutely, she's top 5, trending toward top 1.
Switching over to the men's side, the Villanova men have been off to a little bit of a more different start than the women. Mike, what are your initial impressions of that squad? I was there, got to see them against Temple. I thought they kind of looked kind of what I expected out of them, but then the Delaware State game was a little bit of a head scratcher. They obviously got a big barometer test tonight that you kind of, I think you tweeted or something about today. What are your initial impressions of that squad, and what do they kind of need to show you still?
Yeah, and if you throw in the asterisk that, okay, Cam Whitmore isn't there, but I'll throw an asterisk in on the asterisk that let's not expect Cam Whitmore to show up as a freshman and suddenly change everything offensively and defensively as he works back from his thumb injury whenever he gets on the floor, which, maybe that's pretty close. There's still so many questions. Let's say he slots when he eventually is starting, as we'd expect him to do, and maybe at that point Chris Arcidiacono moves to the bench and actually interestingly could go from a 30-minute guy down behind. He could fall behind. There are not going to be enough minutes for Armstrong, Breezy, and Arch when this team's at full strength. So right now, a little bit of an eye opener. The LaSalle game went the way maybe we expected it to go. But the Temple game, Temple was able to defend them. And even if you want to say, okay, those shots were open against Delaware State, what were they, over 16 the first half from 3, and they were decent looks. Okay, fine. But Delaware State got their points to get the lead. So it's a little surprising. Dixon is who we think he is. An all Big East candidate. He's just knows how to play the game, and his transition to being one of their main offensive players is big. Daniels and Longino, I think are, I always look at teams. I don't look at by position. It's like, who's your best player? Who's your best option? Who's second, third, fourth, fifth? And, obviously if Moore comes back, is able to come back as your top option, that'll be huge. But right now, everybody else is picking up a little more of a load. And I think at full strength, they're dangerous. Right now, they're proving not to be so dangerous.
There's no right answer to this question, Mike, but institutionally, how much leverage do you think Villanova has built up through the years that they can survive a bit of a rocky start or a down? Because it seems like, the college basketball world moves so quickly. You have one bad season and recruits are looking elsewhere. But Villanova's got that track history of success through multiple coaches and that institutional track record. So how much wiggle room is there for, to have a not 35 win season and maintain the momentum that Jay Wright had?
Well, there are all sorts of angles to that, right? There are all sorts of lanes to that. Everyone who's going to be looking, okay, Jay's gone. What's the Kyle Neptune era going to be? But these injuries throw this other factor on there. So if you say, hey, they missed the tournament, well, that's something that Villanova fans aren't going to be prepared for. And I have seen no reason to think that's going to happen, by the way. But again, the bar is now risen to the bar is at Villanova has always, to me, in my time in the city, which is, you're nice not to point out, it's been, I'm in my 35th year at the Inquirer and 30th year covering college basketball. The bar at Villanova has always been get to the Sweet 16. If a successful season at Villanova is getting to the Sweet 16. I was the beat guy for 2 years when Steve Lapis was coaching, and it was the junior and senior year of Alvin Williams and Jason Lawson. So it was 1 year of Kerry Kittles, 1 year of Tim Thomas. When they didn't get to the Sweet 16 those years, after just missing a sort of a Villanova heartbreaker against Old Dominion the year before I was covering it. When they didn't get to the Sweet 16, losing to Louisville and a Cal team that had Tony Gonzalez playing basketball, all of a sudden they weren't getting the level of player that I was just talking about there, because they'd already gotten Malik Allen. They weren't getting the pros at that point. And it became, the switch was made to Jay. And early years of Jay, he was a little tenuous when he wasn't getting there. Then that's the bar for Kyle, and it's not changing because they won national championships. That was the bar for Jay coming in. That was the bar that Raleigh set, that Jack Kraft set. That's a long-winded answer to your question that I'm not even sure I answered. The college basketball world will be looking, and if they're a tournament team, and if Moore, tell me if Moore's healthy, productive, best player on the team in February, and probably have a better answer to that question.
Yeah, Owen, you saw them the last two games, as you mentioned. You were at the Temple game and the Delaware State game. As Mike alluded to, getting Justin Moore back is going to help a ton. We assume getting Cam Whitmore back, even if he's not, immediately freshman All-American, is going to help them in some respect, right? But before then, from your watching them the last two games, who needs to be stepping it up a little bit more?
They're kind of relying on this bully ball offensively to score, right? With Eric down low and Caleb trying to take some advantages of his size against some smaller guards too. I really think they need something out of that guard spot, especially like a third scorer. Longino was kind of the guy I had my eyes on before the season as someone who showed some flashes last year. He still looks a little young, right? Only a sophomore. A guy like Mark Armstrong gave them a spark when they were really desperate for one in that Delaware State game. Obviously, we'll see how he does against some higher levels of competition, but I think he's a guy a lot of people had their eyes on. Something to give them a little spark from the perimeter, I think. Obviously, they're going to run into some bigger teams that take away that interior game. So that would be my thing, getting some type of dynamic play. Doesn't even have to be scoring, maybe creating and keeping those open looks going, but some type of dynamic play out on the perimeter, I think, would really change the dynamic of this team.
Yeah, I mean, we're certainly going to learn a lot more about the Villanova men in the next week or so. They've got Michigan State today in Michigan. Then they've got the PK Invitational to start off with Iowa State. And I think they would either play North Carolina is also in their bracket. So certainly some high-level matchups coming up ahead for the Wildcats, and we'll learn a lot more about them in the next week or two. Let's move on. A couple coaching stories. Mike, more surprise, or I shouldn't even say surprising. Is it stranger to have a Jefferson University without Herb McGee, or to have a LaSalle University with Fran Dunphy?
Yeah, that's a jump ball going into overtime kind of question for sure. I would actually have to say, Fran Dunphy, as the oldest rookie head coach in college basketball, actually wins that tip, because that one maybe you couldn't have predicted. At some point, Herb was going to stop. That is just the way it was. It was a good time. He had told me it had to have been eight years ago that Jimmy Riley was going to replace him when it happened. That has happened now. Jefferson is doing the right thing and naming the gym after Herb McGee Tuesday night, which is a big deal. But Jimmy Riley was doing the scouting. He was doing the recruiting. He had a mind meld with Herb McGee so that Herb trusted him to call out a defense, or make a suggestion for Herb to do something. Either one, they were allowed to do. They had full confidence in each other. So that Jefferson transition to me is a natural one. The LaSalle one, the flip side is I wrote a column from the first day, and it seemed just sort of remarkably normal to have Fran Dunphy back doing Fran Dunphy things, coaching a basketball team, even at age 74.
I was going to say, having now covered the Dunphy era at LaSalle for a couple of games, and it's strange, but it's not strange. Like, there's something there that makes sense. He's got the mustache back. I don't know if that's just for No Shave November, or if that's something moving forward. I mean, Mike, I know you've written multiple columns about this. Can Fran resurrect LaSalle? We'll talk about his current team in just a second, but can he do this?
Well, institutionally, the answer to the question is he can do it. He can have them playing as good as possible basketball this year, and it still could be 14 wins. So I don't know what resurrect. This is not a Sweet 16 basketball team if James Naismith was coaching it. And I don't actually think he had that good a record. I think Fran's probably a better coach than James Naismith. But this is what they are. So, the institutional questions are real there. Can they turn Tom Golo Arena in, reconfigure it, turn it 90 degrees, turn it into a pit, a really tough place to play instead of shooting at walls on both ends. That can help. Can get a top recruiter too in the city to stay. It is really, really tough right now for that to happen when somebody, you look at somebody like Dante Scott, who had a choice between being the guy in the city, his city, or going to Maryland, and you show up there and they show you, here's the on-campus condo you're going to live in, and here's the Big Ten network that your parents are going to see every game in. It's tough. So, the hedges I'm talking about are real. Fran Dunphy, I don't think, has missed a step as a coach, but let's be realistic here. You and I both were, covering a Sweet 16 team now 9 years ago, and I'm still not sure how that happened.
It's a season that certainly gets more and more. When I was like my third year covering basketball, I was like, oh, cool, something like this is going to happen often. And now you look back at it, that was quite a run for sure.
Josh, you got to see LaSalle once or twice already?
Yeah, just once in practice and once against Wagner.
Okay, so what's that on-court product look like, and how do they compare to kind of last year? Have you seen any of the Dunphyisms out there? Or?
A little bit. I mean, I'm not the greatest X's and O's person. I'm sure somebody else would be able to better look and say, they're running this type of action more than they were a year ago. I think what's very clear is just sort of the overall effort looks really good. I think it helps when you bring in the Drame twins from St. Peter's. They're not the most fluid, skilled kids out there, but they play so hard whenever they're on the floor, and they're going to give you a lot of that. That extra umph that I think LaSalle was missing the last few years. So when you have Fousseyni Drame going off for, 22 points the other night, or Hassan going off for double figures, the fact that you can kind of bring them in interchangeably, play them together, and they give you that, really good boost of energy for 50 minutes in the front court is really good. I've liked what I've seen just in brief minutes from the freshman Rokas Jusius, I can't remember if he's Lithuanian or Latvian. Big man. They were high on him coming into the season. You can see why. He's 6'10". He moves well. He doesn't look like a stiff Euro big. He competes. And so I think his long-term upside is good. And then, just sort of about getting the best out of Khalil Brantley, the best out of Josh Nickelberry, the best out of Jameer Brickus that Dunphy possibly can. I don't think we've, in 3 games, I don't know if we're able to answer that question. But the fact is they're 2-1, and they've got a big prove-it game tonight against Wake Forest, so I'm curious to see how they play. They competed against Villanova, that was for sure, but I think we're still 6 to 8 weeks away from really seeing what what LaSalle is capable of this year.
Yeah, Nickelberry's a guy that I've only kind of got to see them a little bit on TV and in person for practicing. Could he be a difference maker if he can kind of fulfill on some? Obviously, he came into college as a big time recruit at Louisville. Mike, I don't know how much you know about him or have seen. Could he be a guy that can kind of take them to another level in the A10 if he can kind of figure things out?
Yeah, huge X factor guy. So his big games, to me, he's been a streaky shooter. So on his good games, all of a sudden the other parts work a little better because, to me, those are the questions as much at the offensive end. Even if they're going to give full effort, even if they can do what they can do they have shooters? Do they have reliable scorers? So, his reliability would go a long, long way to making it easier, because they still, when you talk about needing a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, not in positions, but a guy, first guy, can he be the first guy? That's still way to be determined in A10 play, because I think that's what they were missing the last couple of years as much as anything. And as good as Clifton Moore was, and the players that they had, they didn't have a guy.
Mike, you mentioned the highly likely probable need for LaSalle to upgrade its gym facilities to take that step forward. One program that I think has done a good job of that in the last 7-8 years is Drexel. For those who have not been to the Daskalakis Athletic Center, since they've started those renovations, I think it was in 2014 when they added the enhanced seating and some graphics around the gym, and now they have a new video board. And Mike, have you been to the new DAC yet this season?
I have not. I'd been planning to go the other day. I was going to walk over with Penn, do that column, and then it was just a rainy, nasty night that Penn couldn't guarantee they weren't just going to jump in vans. And then, a column about a bunch of guys in a van going 2 blocks with headsets on, not saying anything. I switched to Jerry Stackhouse versus Aaron McCue. I haven't seen it. I know it's a big deal. I know in comparison to, let's say, LaSalle, there's a big upgrade. I mean, not to be cynical, but Temple's had a nice, video board, since the building opened in 1997. Villanova has one. Palestra is the Palestra. St. Joe's has one. So, to me, congratulations, Drexel. You've upgraded to 1997.
Fair. I think for me, it's not the video board itself. It's the home field, the home crowd atmosphere. Because I would argue that Temple messed up when it built the Apollo Center, and that they built it too big. And that when you
Agreed.
have games like Wagner and only 2,000 people show up, it's so quiet in there, it doesn't give you any type of home court advantage. And I think the difference for Drexel is, with a 2,500 seat arena, both the men's teams and women's teams have been pretty close to selling it out. And that creates a great home court atmosphere, advantage, makes you want to come back to the games, makes you want to get involved in it, that sort of thing that I think Temple is lacking. I mean, Owen, you and I both went to Temple, you a little more recently than I. What does Temple need to do? I'm sorry, we're kind of backtracking a little bit here, but what does Temple need to do to try to get people out there more?
I couldn't tell you. I mean, I was like, the student turnout seems okay, but obviously that's a problem, right? Compared to other schools with that size, it's such a commuter school. There's always going to be that problem. But a game like Villanova last week, they filled up all their student sections, and there were still kind of some empty pockets in there. It's easy to get to via the train and stuff. Obviously, just an exciting product would be the selling point for games. I couldn't really tell you. Obviously, the football program, I'm trying to figure that out for years as well. But obviously, the basketball seems to have more of a, like, I know my dad's from the area, and he has a lot of buddies that went to Temple and stuff, and they still have that draw, but they're never at games and stuff. I couldn't really tell you, Josh. Yeah, obviously I didn't really get to have the game day experience from the student section or anything either. I was always covering games, but that would be the biggest thing, I guess. More than half the students aren't on campus.
I'll take a swing at this. Josh, you were 100% right. They built it wrong. They built it to be a all-purpose facility where they could have graduations. They could have, basically, the athletic department doesn't even have the full rights to it all the time. So hence they built a good practice facility, and they just didn't build a pit. They built an arena, and compare it to Pitt itself. Pitt built a place where they surround with students. They have low luxury suites. It's a modern building. This is not. It's just generic. I felt that the day one. I was the beat writer for Temple for the first 9 years, and I can tell you, the only time they filled the building then was if it was a big St. Joe's game with St. Joe's fans coming in, because they were good then. Big Villanova game, Kansas comes in with Kansas fans, a huge Michigan State fan. Temple never filled the building under John Chaney just with Temple fans, ever. And that was going to 2 Final Eights before they slipped in his final years to an NIT. So, and at this point, there is student life. And so it's not the students. it's the alums, and I know students quickly become alums, and if they don't have that, but I think now Temple administrators thought, okay, we beat Villanova, let's see what the crowd's going to be on Monday. Place was dead on Monday against Vandy. There were probably 8,000 fans, and it was a Temple crowd against Villanova, and then against Vandy, it had slipped back to where it is. So it does certainly get to you must win games, and so let's flip back to Drexel. You're right that when that place is full, it can rock. It's good. So thought maybe, after making the NCAA tournament the year before last and post-pandemic, would the crowds come back? Did they come back last year? So each step matters. And that place historically, when full, is a great home court advantage. I think, as is Hawk Hill when full. But just about all of them. I mean, let's face it, Wells Fargo, when full and rocking, does that for Villanova. So all that matters, but you start with the on-court product.
Sticking with Drexel, I'm not even going to ask whether Amy Mallon was the right hire to follow up Denise Dillon, because that's an easy one. And I don't think either of you have seen the Drexel women this year, so I can just say that Kylie Lavelle is fantastic, and that they keep it rolling. Zach Spiker, 7th year now running the men's program. Bruiser Flint did a good job there for 15 years, but clearly at the end of his tenure, it was time for him to move on. The Dragons have the one NCAA tournament appearance, as you mentioned, Mike, although it was a bit of an underdog run to get there. Where do you think are we thinking the Spiker hire was a good one, and what do you assess as the current state of the Drexel men's program?
Yeah, I think he's a good basketball coach. I didn't know who Zach Spiker really was, and I've joked with him. When they made the tournament, I was writing who the hell is Zach Spiker's story still at that point, which was year 5, and it was interesting. Son of a West Virginia trainer, and his path is an interesting one. So I know what you're saying. I think it's not even fair to go back to, was it a good hire? At this point, it's let me put it this way: the Colonial is a tough league, where it used to be a 4-bid league. Now, what is it? A 1.5 bid league, 1.25 bid league. So it's coming right down to be rolling for 3 or 4 days, and best players in that conference, even before the transfer portal allowed immediate eligibility, best players in the conference kept leaving, and it's been a problem all over the conference. So, I am hedging that question intentionally, because I don't feel it is quite fair to expect, 2 NCAA tournament bids in the first 6 years would have been miraculous at a place. You can talk about their facilities, but the rest of that conference has facilities. They're playing catch up. They're not getting ahead.
Yeah, Owen, I know you haven't seen Drexel men yet, so I'll just sort of share my thoughts. I mean, I think Justin Moore is going to be really good. I think you got 2 more years of Amari Williams, if not one beyond that, if he chooses to use the COVID year. I like what they've gotten from Jamie Bergens. The Oral Roberts transfer has been pretty good. So I think they've got some good young pieces to build around. They only lose Coltrane Washington for next year and Mate Okros. I think Coltrane's a much bigger loss there, but I don't think that anything, with the guys they have, I think they'll be okay. But I'm curious to see certainly how that team, clicks together through the rest of the season. Justin Moore did not play his best. They lose to Penn by 5 points. He plays better. They beat Old Dominion by 12. So I think it's a little bit of just, how the underclassmen play on any given day will determine if Drexel looks like a sort of a top 150 KenPom team or a bottom 250 KenPom team. I just want to pop around to a couple of the other teams that we haven't mentioned thus far on the podcast. Penn, Mike, just beats Drexel the other night, but the Penn men have been a little rocky. They, overscheduled last year. Now they're 1-3 again this season. Are you a fan of the, play a really difficult non-conference, even if you're 2-10, going into an Ivy League play, or are you more schedule difficultly, but also not too difficultly?
Yeah, you've seen it. I mean, there have been like I can't remember even which players were playing at that point, but an 0-7 Penn team, and they can lose a little confidence that way. So it's a very dangerous path that if you start questioning yourselves there. So you need to get a few wins. I actually thought that Drexel game was really important for Penn because there was a winnable game. They went out and won it. Again, this is 4 teams make the playoffs. I love this Ivy format. So many games matter. And then it comes down to, being there for a couple of days, having your best team at that tournament, but you have to earn your way in it. So, it's there is certainly every opportunity for Penn to prove they are, Quakers are who they're supposed to be. I was kind of surprised they were picked first in the league, but that's not knowing the rest of the league, not realizing, Yale lost this, Harvard is where they are, Princeton lost all that. So, sometimes that's what preseason rankings are. Who has the most, veterans back, and that's Penn. So, but, thinking that, they didn't have this, they didn't show, Iona could out-athlete them, I assume, to get their shots to blow past them in the opener, thinking that, they'll be fine. The Ivies doesn't have that kind of athleticism. Well, this Ivy League in the last few years has. So, we'll see.
I just want to touch on St. Joe's, the only program we haven't mentioned here. Owen, you've seen the men's and the women's teams at St. Joe's. Let's start with the women's team. Had some higher expectations for them. I think they were picked 6th in the Atlantic 10 after finishing 12th or 13th a year ago. Have that good sophomore class. But freshman Laura Ziegler, been a bit of an eye-opener early run. What do we like about her so far?
Yeah, I asked Talia Brugler about her, and she's like, well, she's a freshman, but she's been playing against older players as a European for a while now. So the jump's probably not as big as some other players. But yeah, they got 2 forwards that play really well together, can pass together, and can also shoot. So that's a really cool pairing in the front court. It's kind of incredible how young they still are with all those sophomores and freshmen in the mix. And then Jekko just kind of makes the pot stir or whatever, does stuff on both ends. Yeah, they were really impressive against Penn. That was a pretty good game. They had a really good third quarter that they kind of broke out with. I don't know that I didn't get to see them last year, so I don't know what the improvement is, but obviously they were kind of in the middle of a downswing at this point last year. So the fact that they're 3-0 has to feel pretty good. And you've seen the tangible, I guess, growth on the results side.
For sure. They play at Vanderbilt on Sunday. Vandy features Archbishop Wood product Ryan Allen, who's off to a great start for them. I don't know exact numbers, but she had 15 in one game. I thought she had 10 at halftime last night, so she's obviously playing well. Mike, on the men's side there, 4th year of Billy Lang. And I don't want to say the program is spinning its wheels because they are young again this year. Do you think St. Joe's fans would have liked to see more progress out of where they are right now? Do you get the sense that their understanding of like, okay, maybe those last 3 years weren't great, but now there's a good young core to build around? Where do you think the Hawks men are at this point?
Yeah, all good questions. My thought when you're starting from 0, which was, I've written a couple columns on this. One I wrote, give St. Joe's president F for how he handled the transition. As he transitions to Loyola, he's there now, but he was still at St. Joe's when I wrote, give him an F because you lost. Could you have figured out a way to not lose so many Jared Bynums, this great class that was coming in? So Billy gets to start with nothing other than, I shouldn't say nothing because Ryan Daly's was far from nothing and Taylor Funk was far from nothing. But the other column I wrote in the summer was like, listen, if you decide that this is a year where you're, making a referendum on Billy Lang with a big recruiting class coming in next year, are we just starting the same pattern? Are we continuing that? So some other coach gets to, the next year's recruits decide whether they want to stay there. And Eric Reynolds is a terrific guard, gets to decide whether he wants to stay when he's being recruited by Power 5 schools. So that's a dangerous game St. Joe's would play. So I wrote the column should be, Billy, needs to be there next year when those freshmen show up and are merging with, okay, this year, that said, they need to keep their head above water. They can't just sink, obviously. I get that part of it completely. And so far, that's what they've done.
Yeah,
funny that you say that because Phil Martelli, I was going to say Phil Martelli was sort of in that same boat, whereas if he'd lasted one more year, he brings on Jameer Nelson Jr. and Bones Highland. And, he had a great recruiting class lined up. And Hakeem Hart, thank you. Yeah, exactly. So you would hope maybe St. Joe's learned its lesson of that was a horrible decision at the time. And
it wasn't even a horrible decision in terms of like, no lifetime contracts. I've written that over and over again. And if people, were looking to transition from Phil, that's legit. That was legit. But, there was no transition. There was no bridge.
Oh, and sorry, I interrupted you.
No, the external fan bases and all seem to always want to jump the gun, and I'm always pro letting people kind of be able to have some time. You've seen it work out in the past where guys, there's a progression, and we don't kind of see all the day-to-day operations because I think that is like coach speak, but there are little things I'm sure that you can see like on a daily basis that just improve over year as you said it, try to set a culture or whatever. I'm always pro seeing it out. You've seen at every level kind of the turnover, just you could get into a cycle of spiraling down and down and down if you don't kind of let someone catch their feet. And I'm always pro seeing it out an extra year or two or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, how long did it take Matt Langle to get to an NCAA tournament at Colgate? Right? I mean,
Yeah, I thought of Langle right when Owen was saying that. Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, we've been doing this for a little bit. Let's get this wrapped up. Owen, I'm going to ask each of you the same thing, but Owen, I'll start with you since I gave you a little heads up. What's a big question that you have that you would like to, maybe even if we can't answer it in the next 2 weeks, but a big question you have about one of the City Six teams, players, etc., that you've got at this point in the season?
It's a good question. I was thinking about it while you kind of asked me in the queue here. Yeah,
Mike, I'm going to ask you the same thing. So
I think going back to Villanova, I'm just curious to see, like, you have the Givens and Dixon and Daniels, but that team is so loaded with guys that came in with big expectations and highly rated recruits, and there's so much talent. I'm very curious to see which of those guys elevates their game because they could be an exciting team. They should be at some point down the road. I'm really curious to see because there's a lot of guys that have got an opportunity so far and no one's really grabbed it. I'm really curious to see who emerges from that group and starts to step up because that's going to happen at some point, right? You have that many young guys. It takes some time. Someone is going to, but that's what I'm curious to see.
Mike, same for you.
Yeah, I think we certainly sort of covered the answers throughout this, but since Owen went Villanova, I'll go Temple and say, is the Caleb battle we saw against Villanova what we're going to see more often than not, or is is it going to be a melodrama where why wasn't he playing? Why wasn't he playing well? What was going on? Huge factor for Temple immediately.
Now, I was going to say Temple, and then I was like, oh, Mike's going to say Temple. I'll go Villanova women. They've got another Big 5 game at Temple on Sunday, and then play 3 more on the road. They don't even play their first home game until December 2nd. I think if they can come into a Big East opener, 7-0, then things are looking really good for the Wildcats. The one other team we haven't mentioned today is LaSalle women. So I also can ask a question about them. My interesting question with them is they've got 11 women playing double-figure minutes. through the first 4 games of the season. And I'm very curious to see what that rotation looks like, 2 to 3 weeks from now, because clearly right now Mountain McGillivray is just, throwing a lot of pieces out there, seeing how things look, kind of game by game. Who's hot, who's not, what matchups are working, and I'm curious to see how that continues to shake out, because he's got a lot of depth there.
And I'll add, we didn't talk about Temple women either. I heard good things from people I trust about Diane Richardson from her Towson time. So I got to hire when I asked the questions, because I really didn't know about her. But seeing the progress of Temple's women that's an important program in this mix that we're talking about.
Yeah, they had a
preseason, how well they were shooting, and then they've come out of the gates and haven't shot the ball well at all.
They've had some tough luck too. I think 2 of the projected starters, Kendall Currents is out for the year with an injury, and Ania Gordine, I think she might be away from the team. I don't think she played when I saw them. So yeah, they haven't been at full strength, or they're projected full strength. So figuring that out. Obviously, Leah Nelson came in with quite a resume, so it's maybe see her get a little bit more familiar playing at the level that they're going to play at. But yeah, they have some interesting pieces. It'll be about kind of, and yeah, she wants to play fast, so they could be fun team to watch too if they kind of start clicking.
She just brought in so many transfers, and understandably, right? They had a lot of seniors graduated, and she brought some Towson girls with her and others. I think it's just going to take 2 or 3 years with Richardson to get her own girls into the program and build some continuity there and get some team chemistry. And I think they have talent this year, but I just think it's so many new pieces to bring into a program at a different level, et cetera. I'm not anticipating that they're going to be world beaters in the AAC. Cool. Well, I think, Mike, we've kept you on here long enough. I really appreciate you coming on, talking some City 6 hoops with us. For all the listeners, watchers out there, I want to let people know where to follow you on social media for as long as these networks continue to exist.
Yeah, Jensen Off Campus on Twitter, and if that goes down the tubes, I'll start by switching to Jensen Philly Hoops on Instagram. Then we'll figure it out from there. Social media obviously isn't going away.
Mike, what's your where will you be at the next few days?
I've got stories to write as opposed to games to be at.
Nice.
All right, that's fair. We'll be covering this weekend the Westtown Phelps Invitational. Owen, I know you're headed to Westtown tonight. We've got Jerome Taylor at Phelps. We'll be back and forth at those sites all weekend. I'll be covering the Temple Villanova Big 5 women's game on Sunday. Owen, you'll be at Jefferson Kutztown tomorrow on Saturday. So all sorts of, high school, small college, Division I coverage coming up this week on City of Basketball Love. We will certainly do a small college update podcast at some point in the next few days. Once again, thanks everybody for watching, for listening. Make sure you're checking out all of our coverage over at cityofbasketballlove.com. Mike, thank you so much for joining us again, and have a good day, everybody.
Thanks, Mike.
Enjoyed it.